So I'm glad to introduce you all to our speaker, Saman Fatima, who is going to give us an introduction on identity and access management. Now take it away, Saman.
Thank you so much, Zoe, for having me today. And to start with, a very happy Cybersecurity Awareness Month to all of you who are watching me. And happy October. And I hope everybody is safe and everybody is taking care of themselves at these stressful times. So we'll have a quick discussion on identity and access management. That is one of the domains of security, and I pretty much work on it. So I just wanted to elaborate more on the concepts and on what and why do we use this identity and access management in major organizations. So moving forward, a quick introduction about me. Hi, I am Saman Fatima, and I work as IIQ DevOps Engineer in Macquarie Bank here in India. I'm also the co-chapter lead at Infosecgirls Delhi chapter, member of OWASP Delhi, and currently also part of OWASP India. I hold a good face for this domain, cybersecurity, and I really like to grow more into this. So I am regularly learning and exploring more and different domains. And plus the last point, which is that is I'm trained in identity and access management because it's been like 3+ years that I've been working in IAM domain. So moving forward, whenever we see this word identity and access management, we get to see three important words, that is identity, access, and management. So there comes a question to your brain, like, why are we actually, studying about it, or we're actually learning about it? Like, why do we have to know about identity and access management? So I'll just give you one scenario, if you could picture it. Like, for example, you have joined any of your organization as a new employee and you hold an identity of yours. Like, for example, I join any XYZ company and I have my own identity, that is Saman Fatima. So the correct accesses that should be granted to my identity is very, very important nowadays in the organization and in our working. So if I am a new joinee, I should get really basic accesses which I should be having. So it's all the play around of accesses which one person should have and which one should not have. Like, for example, if I am joining it for the first day, so I should not be getting any admin level accesses for the basic system level or anything of that sort, which is really a risk for the company or anything of that sort. So identity and access goes hand in hand. And if some identity is having more access, which that person should not have, that should be revoked from that person. And similarly, who have lesser access but should have more access should be granted to it. So the basic structure lies here with my example. And you could just relate and picture it likewise, that when you join an organization, what level of accesses do you need to have and what you don't need to. So we're talking about one identity, its different accesses, and how do we manage it. So we move around with it and we just come up to, like, what is it, why is it, and how is it? It's really an important function which we have to use in any organization, because it is directly related to our privacy, to our information, to our PI data, to our information assets, which should not be leaked to any other person, which he or she is not entitled to access. So this is a very, very important part when you are running an organization or being part of it, so that your PI data is not getting compromised. Secondly, why do we need IAM? We need IAM because it is actually reducing the risk. It is actually reducing the all types of different controls which can come up when any of your data is leaked. So the all of the business is dependent on IAM. Like, if any important information is leaked, that will cause you a lot of cost, and also a lot of, there would be less of efficiency in your organization. So Keeping that example in mind, you could just relate to the what and why. And how, because how I am, because it actually is improving an organization's assets, or it's actually saving their information around, so that it is not leaked to some other people who are not entitled to use it. So we've clearly demonstrated the what, why, how, and it's actually just throughout my PPT, I just want you to just keep that one example in your mind, that when you have joined your organization, and then you could easily answer the what, why, how. So moving forward, when you land up into the IAM world, you would have heard some of the jargon words, which are really technical in terms of IAM, but it's very basic, because you know the basic meaning of it. It's just the technical terms which are a little different with IAM. So with IAM, one is what you know is identity. That is you, that is me, that is anybody. So the identity is the person is actually who is actually has to have lesser accesses or more accesses, or the neutral accesses. So that identity is you or me. Next we have is entitlement. Entitlement is a technical term used with IAM, but what entitlement actually means in layman's term is access. Access is what is the granular level of access one identity should be having. So if I am part of the administrator team, I should be having the admin level of access. That means there should be some entitlement related to administrator, which should be granted to my identity. So that is pretty much entitlement. Next we come is account. Account means, for example, we have a lot of applications which we run into our system, into our environment, into our organization, or wherever, into our local systems, normal laptops. So we usually have an account on different applications. So that creates an application account of our name in that application. So that is pretty much account, that you hold some accesses with that application. So that application could be any XYZ application. Next we have is work groups. Work groups is pretty much more like, if me, you, or 3 or 4 people need to have same level of accesses. So better than providing them manual accesses one by one, we could just create with one work group, and we could just assign all the users to that particular work group and just grant that work group those level of accesses. So we're good to go. We're not manually using it again and again, doing the same work, but we're actually assigning once the access to that particular work group. Next, we come to workflows. When we move on to more advanced level of IAM, when we study more on the processes, the business processes involved with IAM, that is the starter, transfer, lever. Starter is when an identity joins. Transfer is when one identity is changing its department, and the lever is when one identity is exiting. So for every kind of processes, there are different workflows involved, and for that we have a technical term for it, that is workflows. So workflow is like what all happens behind when an identity joins, when an identity leaves, when an identity transfers. So there are different processes with uh, every other process. So that's pretty much covered in workflows. Next, we have roles. So when you say roles, you usually talk about the layman term, that is, what is your role in the organization? My role is an administrative role. But what your roles means is, for example, I am part of one team where I need to get a lot of access under my name. But what happens is, if they are same level of accesses, like same type of accesses related to administrator, for example, administrator 1, administrator 2, administrator 3. So rather than allocating them one by one under my name, what we can do is we could just club them into a bundle of entitlements, like administrator 1, administrator 2, administrator 3 are bundled together to form a role. So what you will do is when you need all the administrator level of accesses, you'll just assign that particular role under your name rather than one by one tagging those entitlements under your name. You would just give that particular role under your name. So that's pretty much role. Roles are bundle of entitlements, like a lot of entitlements bundled under one, and they're called by a name role. So that is role. The last two processes are very, very crucial in every IAM world, that is aggregation and provisioning. So what do we actually mean by aggregation and provisioning? First, we'll talk about aggregation. Aggregation is nothing but when we bring our raw data to the target system. So it could be any raw data, like it could be like my data, your friend's data together are coming into the target system. So that is pretty, when it comes into the IAM system, that is aggregation. We're aggregating the data into the environment. And when that data goes to the target users, goes to the end user, that is called provisioning. We are provisioning those particular data and their accesses and their flows and processes, everything which is set up in the environment that actually is getting used by the end user. That is more or less what we say that that is getting live to the users. So they're able to see what accesses they have and they can use it pretty much easily. So bringing raw data into the system is aggregation, and that data, when it is available to the end user, is provisioning. So these are the most used terms in IAM world. This can change with different tools which you use, because there are a lot of IAM tools in the market, but the basic structuring, the basic definition remains the same. Like they are very much related to layman's world, but it's just the technical terms are different. So moving ahead, when we talk about identity and access governance, it actually provides us a lot of processes which we can actually implement when we use IAM. So these are all the pretty much structures which we can actually implement. So we'll start from top mid, that is identity management, which we've already discussed about. We're actually managing our identities and we're looking up for the correct accesses for every identity. So that's pretty much covered under identity management. Then we have role management. As I've just briefed you, bundle of entitlements are roles. So we also need to manage the roles as well, that correct entitlements are bundled as one role and the correct role is also assigned to one identity. For example, if one role has mismanaged entitlements and they are assigned to any identity, that is not at all correct as per the access of the identity. Next is access request management. With IAM, we also get a functionality when, for example, I just have two accesses under my name, but I just want to request for the third access to be granted under my name. So that is done via access request management. So there'll be proper request flows for it that will go through multiple levels of approvals, and then that particular access would be granted under my name. So that is access request management. Next is access warehouse. Access warehouse is nothing but, what are the different kinds of accesses which we have into our environment and which should be provided to any identity. So there could be n number of permissions or accesses which could be granted to any identity. Next, we have identity and access recertification. What do we mean by certification and then recertification is because we have, for example, we have around 100 identities in our organization and they're working pretty much fine since 4 to 5 months. But with certification, what we can make sure is we could just check like if all those 100 users are having correct level of accesses or not. With certifications, we could actually certify the users and check if they have the appropriate level of accesses or not. So that is pretty much the certification for identity and their accesses. So there's also a functionality for certifying the users as well on multiple intervals of time. That could be quarterly, annually, semi-annually. That's totally dependent on the organization's requirements. Next, we have segregation of duties. As all we know, what is SOD, segregation of duties. So we basically try to lessen that factor that the person requesting for that particular access is not actually approving that access. That's pretty much what we say is should not happen. And with segregation of duties, we could actually do that, lessen that work. And segregation of duties could be implemented for everything, be it for roles, be it for entitlements, be it for accesses, anything. It could be implemented anywhere. Next, we have integrated provisioning. Provisioning comes up handy with IAM. And as I've told you in my previous slide, that provisioning is nothing but making the data present in the environment available to the target users. So that is pretty much the integrated provisioning. That is the provisioning factors and all the processes and all the cycles are already comes handy with IAM. Next is access risk management. As I've told you with the certification part, when we usually certify the users, we actually also get a functionality for risk also. We get to know like for which identity, how much risk is associated. And as per that risk, as per the organization's requirement, we could actually check up on where the user's threshold has increased or is up, and we could just check like what is the risk involved, like which user has more access or less access, or something like that. So that is access risk management. And last is access analytics, or what you say, access intelligence. There's also a functionality with IAM which we get is like we could do the audit in the sense like, for example, I have to check for XYZ user and for its detail from 2 months. Like I just wanted to check what accesses were granted to that user, what were revoked from the user since 1 month. So I could just audit that particular thing as well with the intelligence feature, and which could track me all the details. This is just one example. We could check a lot of other factors as well. This is related to identities auditing. We could also check something related to the certification as well. We could check when it was raised, who raised it, and stuff like that. We could just get a full gist of what actually happened sometime back, or errors or syslog search. Everything is possible with access intelligence or access analytics, what you say. So this pretty much covers the full package. Like this is all what is getting offered to you by IAM, full package of what all you could do. Moving forward, so this is like a good architecture structure which one could show for IAM. And I have specifically showed you for SailPoint. SailPoint is a famous Gartner's tool, and for its component IIQ, but it's pretty much accessible on every domain. So what you can do is what I've actually told you on the right, on the left hand side, you could see the source system or from where our data comes. Like, for example, I am working at an organization. So my data and every person in that organization's data would be present at the HR system. So HR system is our source of truth, from where the data comes in, from where every details are getting populated into our system, and then it moves forward as and when required. So that becomes our authoritative source or the source of truth, anything which you can call it. With different tools, these technical terms can change, but the basic structuring will remain the same. So we can have like the source system on the left hand side, which you see, and then the data comes into the system. That is IIQ. The data is coming into the system, and it could come via different, processes, which is already there, like certification, roles, reporting, or something like that. And then the data is aggregated or provisioned on different target systems. That could be AD, JDBC, or like disconnected apps like flat file, that is CSV. And there could be also different methods, where one when want to request for any access or something like that, which goes to the ticketing tool. So ticketing tool could be like ServiceNow or BMC Remedy. It could be anything. So this is somewhat the full structure of what goes in and what comes out and what you actually see. So that pretty much covers, and you could see the end user and everything. For every entitlement, there could be a owner, there'll be manager, there'll be app owner for different applications which are in the system. So this is pretty much the architecture for I. Next we have, I have clubbed down few functionalities and how does it goes through with the IAM framework. So the first one which we will be discussing is identity request. So you will have to picture this scenario like when you have joined an organization. So what all steps or processes one could go through. So the first block, when the identity is into the system, into the IAM system, it will have multiple accounts on different application, whichever is required by the identities end and which needs to be managed by that particular system. So for example, I joined the organization and I am part of 3 applications because I have to be part of those 3 applications and would be managed under those 3 only. Next, what happens is I would be having certain accesses, that is nothing but entitlements. So my identity would be having certain entitlements under my name, and which would be through direct or indirect aggregation. Like aggregation, either they are coming from direct apps, that is what you have seen in the last slide, that is AD, JDBC, and stuff like that, or it could be through a flat file where you're actually providing an Excel sheet with the data and that is getting processed. So it could either come through, ticketing tools, or it could just directly come by aggregation into the system. So my entitlements, my identity is in place, my entitlements are in place. Moving to the third block, that is, I have 3 accesses under me, but I just want a 4th one as well. I need that access as well. So what I can do is I could raise that particular access for myself and it would go through multiple level of approval. So the same is identity raises an access request and thereafter it gets approved by respective supervisors or approvers or whatever the flow is for that particular entitlement to whichever person it needs to go. Next is then whenever the access request is granted, like it comes under my name, it goes through different processes of provisioning, which I've already told you. Provisioning is it's getting allocated to the end user, the target user from the system. Like after aggregation, it gets provisioned to me. It gets provisioned under my name. So there will be plans and processes and everything for that. Like there's a basic plan, what you say, like whatever plan you draw up for any event. Similarly is a provisioning plan, which will have my identity and I have requested for which access, so it will take up all the details and it will process it. This is something in a very layman terms I am telling. So it will process it and it will provision it under my name. And once all the approvals and everything are done, then that particular access is granted under my name, whichever I have requested for. And then that access request is approved and everything is done. And then whenever the next aggregation is done, like the next refresh of my data is done, then it would be properly getting reflected under my name. So next is the second last block is nothing but it talks about the events which can get triggered for my name. That can be either creation or deletion or modification or anything. I just want something to be updated on my identity, so I'll get it updated. Deleting something from my records, that is also. Creating something is another step. So you have a lot of processes which you can take in place for any identity, and which I've already briefed you, which comes through certain processes, which is nothing but workflows, what we call here in our environment. So that's pretty much workflows. And last is workflows are usually run at the back end and do their work as and when what needs to be triggered. Like I just want something to be updated under my identity. So that will take certain steps to get it, to get it updated. So that's pretty much the work of workflow that gets it updated from the back end or something, and it just gets reflected from the front end. So this is pretty much an identity request, like when one wants to request for any special access which that person is not having, this is the high level flow chart for the process, like what happens if an identity request is made. So moving to the second framework we have is aggregation and provisioning. Because before with identity request, sorry, we have aggregation and provisioning playing a really major role in the framework. So what I've already explained you about aggregation and provisioning is pretty simple. Pulling the source data into the system is aggregating the data, that is aggregation. And that particular data, when it comes into the system to your to your system wherever you're working, then to get it available to the end users, to the target users, to get it live, is more or less termed as provisioning. So you can see that the whatever applications data, when it is pulled into the framework, into the IAM system, is called aggregation process. And whatever, you're getting it reflected on the end user, like I should have A access but not have B access. So I will do all those processes, and that will be provisioned under my identity, that I will have only A access and not B access. So B should not be getting reflected under my name. Next part is the same is we could do it through different connections. The aggregations could be done through different connections. That could be either AD, or we're pulling up data from AD, we're pulling up data from a database, like we're providing it a database location and we're pulling it from there. So there could be multiple places where we could be pulling our source data from. It could be either from a flat file, like we provide a CSV file there, and we just want that all that data should be pulled up from that particular flat file. So aggregation is that process when we connect the data to the IAM framework. And like, for example, there could be certain application, like one example I gave you, that is CSV files, the flat files, which are not connected. So what you can do is then we could do some custom methods or anything of that sort, whatever we want with our aggregation and provisioning functionalities, and we could mold it or tweak that thing into our own processes, whichever we want. So things are really, really customized at a very high level, and which we can do it at like before aggregation or after aggregation, before provisioning or after provisioning. Like, for example, I'll give you an example for that. You want your data to come into the IAM system, but you want certain look for that data. Like, I just want it to look like so and so. Like, I want to see everything column wise or row wise or something like that. You have certain requirements for that. So you could just do certain customizations, which will happen before the data is coming into the IAM framework. So you would do such customizations, and then your data would be looking as it is, like you wanted. So it's been implemented before that particular process is run. And then you could do the same with after as well. Like, after aggregation or after provisioning, you want your data to look a little different. So that also can be customized with different mechanisms into picture. So that's pretty much on aggregation and provisioning, which we've covered right now. The last one, which is the major portion, that is certifications, which I've already briefed you. One should actually certify its users to know that everybody has the correct level of accesses, and if not, they could be corrected at regular intervals. Like, for example, when my identity is certified and one finds that I have one access extra, so that is correct. Like, that is wrong in a way that I have an extra access, but still that is correct in that ways that if we organize certifying the users in different intervals, we could actually be minimizing the risk of getting our data leaked, getting our information assets leaked. So that is pretty much helpful with certifications. So that pretty much covers the first block, that it refers to the access review or access roster mechanism. Second, it could be performed over a period of time that could be either monthly, quarterly, annually, whatever is your requirement, with whatever time frame you do it. But doing it is a good thing. Not doing is not correct. The third block says if you want to perform any certification, like if you want to perform any certification and certify any users, you would need a certifier for it. Certifier is nothing but supervisor or approver, somebody who is at a higher level and who can check it, like what level of accesses one should be having. So what you can do is, like, for example, some of the identities are coming under my name and I want to certify them. So I will be checking like what level of accesses that particular people have, and I could just check it and approve or revoke it as and when I see what is required at what level. And the last is the same. The purpose for certification is to review appropriate access and to check if there is any inappropriate access which should be revoked. So whatever you have, if it is fine, then you're good to go. You're continuing with those accesses only. But if you have more access, which is somewhere down the line will create a risk to the organization or to the records, then you should be revoked from those level of accesses. So this is the framework for certifications. Next, we have, when we've covered so much on the framework for the IAM, we will want to know like what are the benefits and what are we getting out of IAM. So I guess by these number of slides, you would have understood the importance of IAM. And I've also briefed that into this structure, this block structure, because with IAM by now, everybody would have understood like what level of accesses one should have. So that's very, very important for any organization to implement, that everybody should have the appropriate level of access. And I guess everybody would have gotten bored by this term, but this is actually very important, and it poses a lot of risk. Like if somebody has an extra level of access and is having a right hand on some very information assets for the company, you are actually doomed. And if it's used in a very wrong way, then that information is technically gone. And I'm not sure, there's a lot of processes behind it, but that is something not one should want with their organization getting their informations leaked. So the first benefit of IAM which I've listed is the improved data security. So we're actually securing the data and it's not getting misused, and it's properly safe, and it's used under those people, is used by those people only who actually require those level of accesses. So we're actually improving the data security with IAM. Secondly, we have reduced security cost. So for example, your data is secure, your company people have only appropriate level of accesses, then there is no risk that is pertinent to your organization. So you're actually reducing the security cost, because post leakage of data, if you're leaking some very clients important data, so that pretty much costs you a lot, like a lot. So that is one thing, that we're reducing security costs with IAM. And last is more effective access to resources. So we're actually effectively judging and deciding like which user should have what level of accesses, and then we're just segregating those accesses into the users, so that not everybody has the administrator access, and only few people have those accesses where they could do anything and everything. So that's pretty much sums up with the benefits, like the major benefits of IAM comes handy with the data protection and your security cost reduction. So that's the major points. Next, so yes, with every tool, with every concept, we have both the sides. Like we have, if we have the benefits, then we will be having challenges as well. But challenges which we can overcome, but we do have some challenges with IAM as well. So the first one which you see is deprovisioning. We've learned about provisioning, but we want to learn more on deprovisioning. I'll give you just one scenario. Like you leave from a company, like you've left the company, you've gone to some other company, but still your accesses are still there. Like your accesses have not been removed properly, and you could still see some of the information from your older organization. So that is pretty much the worst part, like the biggest challenge of IAM is deprovisioning, and that needs to be taken care of like regular intervals. We should be deprovisioning, and we should be checking like who all have left the organization should also not have their accesses live, should not be active, and we should be properly tuning them as in when in in different intervals, so that they're deprovisioned from the system, and the levers are not seeing those information from outside the organization. So that's one challenge of IAM. Second is authentication easy to perform. With IAM, we have a different number of people involved, like one from the IT end and one from the other end, who are actually the customers who are using this. So we would want the authentication process to be very easy, very user friendly, so that it's accessible and it can be used from both the ends. Like they are easily able, like the IT people are easily able to deploy it as well, and the customers or the clients are able to use it as well. It's kind of user friendly, because we humans only love user friendly UIs. So it's pretty much more accessible. So we also count it as one of the challenge, so that we should have an easy authentication process to perform. Next is what you say, IT people functioning or the manual processes. So with IAM, because it's new and not many people have good knowledge on the framework or the functionalities of what happens. So there could be a lot of manual processes which could come into picture, which are done by normal people, but more pressure or more thoughts should be put forward in automating them. Like, for example, you take the process of deprovisioning itself. It would sound really small, like one should check for the accesses for the levers, but imagine a scenario when like 20 people, 30 people have left, like they've left, and you have to deprovision all the accesses for those particular user. So rather than manually deprovisioning their access from the system, you could actually automate it. So that's pretty much one of the challenge, automating more on those processes, on any processes involved. And the last is single source of truth. So with IAM, we should always try to have a single source of authoritative source, like from where our actual data is coming into the system. So we should try and have single source of truth. Why single source of truth? Because if data is coming from different applications, like for example, one data is coming from AD, one is coming from Azure directory, and some other data is coming from some XYZ source. So it gets, the sources are getting more in number, so that more and more data is coming from different sources, so that if different sources data are coming, we would need more processes to manage those data. We would not want our raw source data to come from very unauthoritative source. We would want it to come from a very authoritative source. So we should always try and have a single source of truth. So those are the major challenges of IAM. Okay, so when we walk into the market, we would be having a lot of tools which use IAM, but I have listed the four major ones as per me. It could be varying for others as well, but the major vendors which are the talk of the town are listed here. So the most famous one, like the most used one, and which is more handy, which is considered in a lot of places, is SailPoint. So SailPoint is a Gartner's tool, and is is having a lot of versions. It has latestly released its version, which has actually collaborated with AI. So we have a lot of versioning with SailPoint, and we could actually use our IAM framework with SailPoint and better function it. Next we have ForgeRock. ForgeRock is also a latest one, is a great tool. Next, we have IBM Security. IBM Security is also one of the IAM vendor, and it's a pretty much good tool. And last, which I can say, is Okta. So Okta is also one of the IAM tool, and they all use the basic functionalities of IAM. May have different user interfaces, may have different technical terms, but the major functioning remains to be the same, that is identity and access management. So these are the pretty these are the four famous tools which you could just hear about a lot with IAM. I would just give up a brief on SailPoint because I'm currently working on it. So as I've told you, it's a Gartner's famous tool, SailPoint, and it's one of the leading IAM and IAG tool. It is an on-prem tool from 7.0 release, and it has a lot of patches with every other versions. It has improved a lot. Like currently, it's on the 8th version, and you could get different versions with it as well, like 8.1, 8.2, and with different patches as well. So I have started working with SailPoint from 6.3, and now it has reached to 8. So it has pretty much come up a long way, provides a lot of customization, easy to use, and it has a great customization factors, more and more functionalities, to secure your organization's data and use it more, wisely amongst the people. um, Next, it has major three solutions. That is IIQ, that's the on-prem one. The next is Identity Now, which is the cloud-based access management solution, and which is the newer one. Identity IQ uses bean shell programming more. Identity Now is more towards the cloud access management. And last, we have the Security IQ for the unstructured data. So that's pretty much the three components that SailPoint offers. Either you use the on-prem one or the cloud-based one or the unstructured data. So that is it. And last, I just wanted to quote that with identity management, it works the best when you have the best human resources, best IT, security, and other departments involved. Because with identity management, we have all these sources coming in together as one and working together, because when one just goes down, the entire management goes down. So the HR, the IT, the security, and all other departments involved works the best for identity management. So here I just close up all my slides, and thank you all for coming and learning with me the introduction of IAM. And I hope you would have got a good picture about IAM and know more on its risk and how to use it. So thank you. Thanks a lot. Over to you, Zoe.